Hi, everyone. I'm Nicole Potter, in case you don't know, and I am the founder of Legacy Game Changers. I want to begin by saying thank you, truly. Thank you for choosing to be here, for giving yourself the next 30 minutes or so, because I know how full life can be and how time is not something most women have excess of. So I want to honor the decision that you made to slow down, even briefly, and give yourself this time. If you're here, it's likely because something about one of the posts tugged on your heart. It wasn't loud, dramatic, but it was just enough to make you pause. And I'm really glad that you listened to that because I believe that was God and you were meant to be here. Nothing is required of you here. You don't need to show up a certain way, feel anything specific, or even have words for where you're at. This time is not about learning more information because we just don't need more information. And you're also not here to fix something about yourself. This space here today is about creating space, space to breathe, space to listen, and space to reconnect. So as we begin, I invite you to let yourself arrive just as you are. Maybe you have yourself a nice hot liquid. And before we go any further, I want to say this out loud. At least for the next 30 minutes, nothing else needs your attention. Not because I need your focus. It's just you don't need to multitask. You don't need to be productive. Just staying here and listening to what God has for you is more than enough. I believe you're here on purpose. And with that, let's begin where love actually starts. Scripture tells us that God is love. Have you thought about that? Because if God is love, then love is not something that we need to manufacture. It's something that we receive. From the very beginning of time, God placed his love print in you and I. Before we ever began to strive, or before we ever felt the need to prove, or before we started to live in survival mode. And until we can learn to receive his love and learn to love ourselves through his eyes and heart, we will keep searching for life and love in places that just can't sustain us. So what if loving yourself really wasn't selfish, as we have been taught to learn? What if loving yourself is actually what your life depends on? Because it truly does. You know, this is the third attempt to record this video. And I too could have pushed myself, beat myself up. But that wouldn't have done anything except put more pressure on myself, cause more stress and more anxiety. So before we begin, I want to invite you to slow your body down, even just a little. Not to create a moment, not to do anything right, but just to notice that you're here, because that matters. If it helps, let your shoulders soften. Take one slower breath than usual, because there's nothing you need to feel in order to belong here. You belong here just as you are. There's nothing that you need to understand yet. Nothing you need to fix. This time together isn't about gaining more information, as I've already said. It is about remembering something that we already carry. One of the most grounding truths that I've come to trust is this: God's posture toward us has always been love and relationship. And not because we earned it, and not because we figured something out, but because love and relationship was the starting point. From the beginning of time, God placed his love print in the human heart before the world began, before fear, before survival, before religion. That longing that you've carried for connection, for safety, for being seen, for being wanted, didn't come from nowhere. It came from God. We were created from love, by love, and for love. Because God wanted relationship. But when scripture speaks of us as God's children, it's not a title that we need to perform into. It is an identity that we receive being God's children. Being God's children means that we have full access to his heart, full access to care and protection, full access to belonging. Much of what we've been longing for our entire lives. It's not something that we were ever meant to chase. It was something that we were always meant to receive. And the reason why Jesus died was to reconnect us back to the Father, to walk and talk with him, just as Adam and Eve did. And until we learn how to receive love and reflect that same love towards ourselves, and to distance ourselves from God and the relationship that we were created to have, we will keep searching for love, for connection, for relationship, for life in places that just can't hold it. It's why we haven't been able to fully rest. So again, I ask you, what if loving yourself isn't indulgent? What if loving yourself is what your life needs now? Because it is. And as I said in the beginning, God's love was first. What stirs inside you when you hear that? Does your body want to resist and shut down and push it away? Maybe there's a resistance to that even being true. Maybe you feel relief, curiosity. Maybe it has no effect on you at all. Maybe hearing that God loved you first all along and will be the one who loves you last and forever, maybe that could bring tears. Because I know it did for me. And none of this comes with judgment. I just want you to notice what comes up when you hear God has always loved you. He has always wanted to have a relationship with you. Because most of us have learned to, or think we will be kind to ourselves after things improve. After we feel healed. After we feel calm. After we feel confident. But love doesn't begin with a feeling. Love begins with a choice. God didn't wait until we were whole to love us, until we were cleaned up and better. He loved us while he was forming the world, while he was forming us, and while we were learning to survive. Loving yourself looks like choosing gentleness when your first instinct is to push harder or to berate yourself. To be honest, I still have to catch myself on occasion. When I was creating this video and many others, when tech doesn't go as we planned, when things aren't coming together easily, if I don't do things in a manner or time that I think that it needs to be done. Instead, I, like you, need to choose to pause instead of overriding your limits. Choosing not to partner with shame and condemnation, even when those feel so familiar to us. And at first, these choices can feel awkward, even untrue. What if you said to yourself, I'm allowed to take up space? Try and say that. I'm allowed to take up space. I'm learning, not failing. How do these feel? Repeated choices create new inner ground. And feelings grow where safety exists. We don't wait to feel loved in order to practice love. We practice love so our hearts can learn safety again. And honestly, it may be that we are feeling safety for the first time. So I want to ask you a question. Where do you notice yourself withholding kindness, grace, patience, compassion until you do better? And you don't have to post this in the comments. This is between you and God. Because most women that I walk with would never speak to another person the way that they speak to themselves. And I know that this is true for me. I have been my worst enemy, the one who's been the hardest on myself, the expectations that I have of me that I wouldn't put on somebody else, the quiet or the very loud commentary that replaced the mistakes, conversations, constant measuring. That inner voice becomes the environment that you live in. And what you focus on grows. An environment shapes everything. How safe you feel or don't feel. How you hear God or you don't. How you relate to others and yourself. Because God's voice is not harsh. He's not in a rush. When we talk about loving ourselves, we're not lowering our standards. We're not making excuses. We're changing the tone of the relationship that we have chosen to live inside. Because growth doesn't begin with doing more. It begins with listening differently. And often the most loving thing that we can do is notice how we are speaking to ourselves and choose something gentler. So what is the tone of your inner voice today? Is the tone of your voice gentle, kind, compassionate, and grace? Or is it harsh and judgmental, condemning and shaming? These questions are not to judge us. They're to bring awareness to where God wants to soften and bring love into. But what would the tone be? Because many women carry a quiet punishment towards themselves. What they didn't know, for what they stayed in, for how long it took them to leave or to change. But staying connected to old versions of yourself keeps you emotionally stuck in those seasons, and God wants to break you free. Grace isn't just something God offers to us. It is something that we are invited into to receive for ourselves. Now, hear me. That doesn't mean that we're making excuses for our behavior. And Nicole said that, it's when we are consistently attempting to do better and we're still not perfect. Because we can be a masterpiece and a work in progress at the same time. Self-forgiveness doesn't erase responsibility. Neither does grace. It releases punishment for not being perfect. It says, I was doing the best that I could with what I had at the time. It says, I'm allowed to learn and make mistakes. I don't have to be perfect. And it also says that I don't have to keep paying for my past. I am not my life experiences. I can move forward from here. Healing requires a disconnect, a release from your past, from holding you captive, from being able to move forward. It's not about forgetting, but it's about loosening the grip to give you some freedom to move forward. So I have another question. And again, these do not have to be posted in the comments. These are about self-reflection for yourself. But I ask you, is there a past version of you that still feels like she's on trial? There are times in our lives that we didn't have many choices and neither one of them reflected the perfect choice. And there's things that we needed to do to survive the season or the situation that we were in, but we did the best that we could at the time. We are constantly evolving and growing, and hindsight is exactly that. We can know better now because we know more than what we did back then. So I want you to give yourself permission to let go of an old version of you so that you can step into the version of you that is now. Because when you begin to respect yourself internally, something shifts externally. You can stop over-explaining. You can stop tolerating what drains you, people-pleasing. You begin choosing from trust, which is a really hard thing for many of us to self-trust or to trust others. But you can begin to choose from trust instead of fear or skepticism or suspicion. Not because you're hardened or resentful or out of pain or hurt, but because you're anchored. Healthy boundaries come from confrontation. Don't come from confrontation. Boundaries come from clarity. And clarity grows as you start to be connected to yourself and to God. And loving yourself strengthens discernment. Because many of us are making decisions that we're calling discernment, but they're based on a wounded version or a wounded lens that you are seeing life through. So loving yourself, rooted and anchored in God's love and truth, strengthens your discernment. It strengthens your confidence and self-trust. It doesn't weaken it. Where might honoring yourself more gently change how you show up? This is something that I myself have been trying to do in my own life. I've come to realize that some of my reactions are not based on the little inconsequential things that are happening or the little situations. As I'm starting to heal, I'm realizing I'm having some reactions that I need to take to God because they are bigger than logically make sense. And it's because the Lord is trying to get to the root. See, little things aren't the issue. It's the little situations that are caused because of patterns, dysfunctional patterns that have been created based on us needing to carry everything or whatever the reason might be. And as we go through this process, life can feel a little rocky and may even feel like they're meltdowns, but they're actually melt throughs of old versions of yourself trying to transition into the new. And things can be a little messy. There is no moment where you arrive completely. And there's no moment where you arrive at loving yourself. It's something that we need to return to again and again. See, healing isn't an event. It's not a one-time thing. It's a process. It's not linear. And we need to return back to this loving ourselves and having compassion again and again. Some days we remember and some days we forget. There's an ebb and flow to this. But it's choosing consistency over intensity. It's about choosing presence over perfection. And honestly, the hardest part is owning our own part, even though somebody else has done something that has triggered us to do it, because we're really only responsible for ourselves. Other people just are poking at them with their own everyday lives, and it's not intentional, even sometimes when it is. People are really doing the best that they can in any given moment, even when it hurts. Because we all have stuff we're facing that we don't see. Loving yourself is a quiet agreement to stop I was tripping over my own tongue. Loving yourself is a quiet agreement to stop abandoning your own heart and your own needs. And honestly, before me tripping over my own tongue, I would have beat myself up for and I would have re-recorded the entire thing. Now, it's part of my process. I'm not perfect. Before we move into the reflective time together, I want to share something briefly. And it's not a lesson. I just want to help put this into context. I'm not sharing today from a textbook. And I'm not sharing it from theology alone either. And I'm really not sharing it as someone who has figured it all out quickly or got it all together. But this has come from my own life and my relationship with the Lord. About 5 years ago, God invited me to step away with Him, not to do more, not to fix myself, which is what I thought. Let's be real. But to let Him show me who He actually was, not who I learned Him to be, and who I truly was, not based on who I thought I was, based on life experiences or what people were telling me. Because up until that point, so much of my focus was on what I thought I was to do and what was wrong with me. I blamed myself. I blamed others. And let's be honest, I blamed the enemy for much of the confusion and spiraling I was living in. And while life really does bring turmoil, loss, and transitions, and unanswered questions, what I slowly began to see was this: God was never absent. And the battle that I thought I was fighting with myself and the enemy had already been won. God wasn't inviting me into more effort. It was a return to Him. The Bible says, return to your first love. That's God and yourself. There were parts of my life, and maybe that you will see in your own story, that you did not want to look at. Areas I assumed God already knew and was disappointed in. Places I thought He wouldn't want to be involved in. Areas that I was ashamed to show Him. But what I found instead was love, not exposure for shame, but love that gently reached places that I hadn't even realized I was avoiding, or were the roots to things that were happening in my life. We didn't connect so that He could condemn me or label me, but so that He could love me and heal me. And it became very clear to me that there are two relationships in this life that we cannot escape. The one we have with God, even though we feel distance, the disconnect is within ourselves, because His word says, I will never leave you, I will never forsake you. He lives within us. How can we separate from Him? And the other one is with ourselves. As much as we would like to separate, I've said it to people around me. I know I'm a nightmare right now and I can't get away from me, but you can. And when we don't return to these relationships first, together, meaning ourselves and God, we will end up chasing answers everywhere else, spinning in circles, fighting the devil, never quite finding rest. This is not about becoming self-focused. It's not about turning inward in isolation. That is not what I'm talking about. It's about learning how to see ourselves with God as their reference point. Because we were always loved. And we are still always loved. And we will always be loved. And that verse, so many of us know, love your neighbor as yourself. This quietly assumes something very important, that we actually know how to love ourselves. But God and I had a conversation about this a few years back. And I continue to return to this conversation because I can't be the only one who notices the Christian bashing across many platforms in our lives. But I ask God, if we're to love our neighbors as we love ourselves, I could feel the grieving. He says, well, that's because my children are loving their neighbors as they love themselves. And I was like, pardon? In a human capacity. See, as humans, we look in the mirror and we see all of our flaws, and in love or in hate, we choose to scrutinize and point fingers, become judgmental, shame, and condemn. That's not God's love. And I don't say that in judgment. That's not what I'm saying. That's what he said to me is my children need my love in them, to love them, to be able to love others in the same capacity. Not apart from God, but with him at the center. He pours into us the same grace and mercy that he wants us to extend to others. Just something to think about. So before we end today's webinar, I want to invite each of you into a few moments of space. This space isn't to analyze. This space is not to fix. It's just a moment to notice what's already here. This is also not about getting something right. It's about letting yourself be seen by God and by yourself without pressure. There was this big struggle of mine and many people that I've worked with that feel that they're not seen. And it's a big stumbling block. And what the Lord had spoke to me in this season and to many of the women I worked with is we're not seen by ourselves. And we also feel that we're not seen by God. So when we can learn to reconnect to ourselves with God and we can show up for ourselves and we can see ourselves, then that struggle will no longer be a tripwire for us, because we'll know with certainty that we're seen by ourselves and God sees us. And we'll take that pressure off to perform, to be seen. So as we step into this mini encounter, you don't need to close your eyes unless you want to, of course. Unless you're driving, please keep your eyes open. But you don't need to hear anything specific either. This is simply space. I want you to first start by feeling the chair or the couch or the item that you're sitting on or leaning against. Because we don't notice these things. I want you to notice your breathing. Is it short and shallow? Are you able to take a full breath? I'm not asking you to change it. I'm just wanting you to notice yourself and the space, the environment that you're in. And I want you to feel your body as well. I don't literally mean putting your hands on it, but be aware, is there tension, tiredness, aches that you feel in your body? Because those are areas where you're holding tension and stress and things that the Lord wants to connect to you with. And in this moment, I want you to place your hand on one of those areas. And I want you to ask God to come into those areas and to release the pressure, the tension, the stress, the pain. Because our bodies are talking to us all the time. There's reasons for it. And we can do a broadcast about that at another time. But for now, I just want you to notice how you're relating to yourself today. Are you tired? Do you feel guarded, open? Maybe you feel neutral. And whatever you notice is okay. And if you're open to it, I want you to quietly ask God this question. How do you see me right now? I don't want you to force an answer. You may notice a word, a sense, a feeling. You may simply feel stillness. You may feel nothing, and that's okay. Just know that God is with you in this moment. It's not about our feelings. Notice the thoughts that are coming up. I don't want you to disqualify yourself. And I want you to gently say to yourself, I am allowed to receive love. I want you to say that again. I'm allowed to receive love. Next, I want you to say, I don't have to earn care. And I feel to go back to the original statement from the beginning. I'm allowed to take up space, and my needs matter. Then I want you to take one slow, deep breath in and slowly exhale it. You can do that as many times as you want, and I want you to, as you breathe in, to exhale God's presence and to exhale any tension. And I want you to place your hand on your chest or on your belly or both and say, I am safe. God is here. And you can stay there as long as you like. Before I talk about anything else, I want to honor what you just experienced. You don't need to name it, and you don't need to understand it. And you don't need to carry it forward perfectly. Even a small amount of gentleness counts. Many of us think we need to take long periods of time and hours, and just that few moments can settle you and ground you and anchor yourself with God that can shift the atmosphere around you. For many women, this is the first time in a long time, or it might even be the first time that you have taken this time for yourself. Even that 2 minutes of intentional space that you've slowed down without being pulled immediately into fixing or explaining. And I want to tell you, if nothing felt clear, that's okay. If something stirred quietly within you, that matters too. And if you simply just felt less alone, that matters as well. God doesn't rush connection, and neither do we. What we've touched here, even briefly, is something many women have been longing for without words, or maybe even being able to name it, or maybe feeling selfish if you did. But not seeking answers, not another strategy, but presence. You're allowed to take up space and be present with yourself and God. Being seen without being corrected or feeling like you need to be. Being known without being exposed. Being loved without having to prove anything. And learning to trust yourself again. Because that's the foundation. It has been the biggest struggle between me and God. Let's be real. The struggle is within me. God has been convincing myself that I can be trusted for years with Him. And it's something that you're allowed to return to as well. At your pace. In your way. Nothing here requires urgency or pressure. Before we close, I want to gently name something. For some women, moments like this will open a desire, not for more information. Oh my word, we have a world, we have so much information at our fingertips. And not for intensity or pressure, but for a safe, consistent space to stay connected. Because what we touched here today isn't meant to be rushed or forced. It's something that you're allowed to return to slowly. So in a few weeks, I'm opening a free 30-day journey called Anchor Together. It is a gentle space where women are invited to stay connected. Connected to God, connected to themselves, and connected to a community where women want the same thing. To be anchored in His love and truth, with Him as the reference point. There's no pressure. There's no expectation. And there's no requirement to share or perform. You don't even have to finish it in 30 days. If you find one post that speaks to where you are, you can stay there for as many days as you need to, because this is your journey. I'm merely holding the space for you. You don't even have to comment. This group is all about you and what you need. This group won't be for everyone, and it's unlike any that I've seen, because it isn't about having big numbers, big engagement. It's about making an intentional choice to slow down and take time for you. God is to be the focal point, not me. We want to become anchored in His love and in His truth. There will be daily posts for 30 days. There will be a weekly reflection and one guided encounter. And to be honest, I don't even know at this moment for sure how He's going to have me release them. They may be all there at the beginning. Or He may have me release one post at a time for the first 30 days and then just let it run on its own. And each one of you can use it as you need. He is the creator. I am the vessel hosting this space for us all. It's simply an opening for you to take space, to practice staying present, to learn His truth instead of slipping back into striving and self-abandonment. So if and when that feels supportive for you, you're welcome to message me or comment below the word anchor. And I'll share you more details and the link with you. And if now isn't the time, that's okay too. Nothing here needs to be decided today. But for now, I just want to end this space gently in prayer. God, I want to thank you for meeting each woman exactly where she is, whether live or on the replay. Thank you for the parts of them that showed up, even the tired parts, the guarded parts, the unsure parts. Thank you for your steady love that doesn't rush, doesn't demand, or withdraw. And as each one moves back into their lives, help them remember they are not alone. Teach them gently how to stay connected to you and to themselves with honesty and care. Let what began here continue quietly in ways that feel safe and true for each one here today, as only you can do. In Jesus' mighty name I pray. I want to thank all of you for attending. I honor your choice to spend time with me today, and I want to leave you in his most loving and capable hands, rooted deeply in his love and truth. Until next time.